The biotech sector is emerging from a multi-year decline. There's value to be found in this recovery, and I want to share some thoughts about how to take advantage of this trend. In doing so, I want to describe how I frame an investment idea that blends thematic and qualitative elements along with some fundamental factors. Investment success in biotechs depends on your appraisal process, your risk controls, and your experience. Biotechs are risky, and they're really only appropriate for investors with a high tolerance for risk. There is an emerging trend, a massive trend, in the pharmaceuticals industry. It's called weight loss drugs. I've been writing about this on synthetic.com for the last few months. This once sleepy backwater of the pharmaceuticals industry came alive about 3 years ago after success with a diabetes treatment that proved effective for weight loss. This new class of drugs is called GLP-1 agonists, or glucagon-like peptide 1. The most popular of these drugs is Ozempic and the newly approved Wegovy, both from Novo Nordisk. You've probably heard about Ozempic on TV or seen it being promoted by social media influencers. These new GLP-1s are synthetic analogs of a neurotransmitter that occurs naturally in the gut. These drugs were first approved for glucose control in diabetes patients and obese patients about 20 years ago. Now they're being prescribed in much higher doses for weight loss, and the U.S. is the leader for reasons I will explain. I think I should add some context to the discussion. Today, the U.S. spends nearly 20% of GDP on healthcare, over $4 trillion annually, and some estimates suggest that more than half is related to cardiometabolic disease. This is because obesity is linked to more than 60 chronic diseases, including type 2 diabetes, heart disease, stroke, and some forms of cancer. With more than 100 million people in America considered obese, the total addressable market for these drugs is enormous. Plus, GLP-1s have shown some potential to generate positive upstream impacts beyond just weight loss by reducing obesity-related conditions, adding to their perceived benefits. The two largest disease states in the U.S. are type 2 diabetes and obesity, and the size of the indicated populations is rising. So you can see why these drugs could become huge sellers in the near future. There's another piece of the puzzle, and that's what's happening in society and culture to bring about population-level obesity. 10 years ago, I observed in a post on my website how junk food companies were targeting third world populations in much of the same ways they've been doing in the United States for many years, particularly with children. I wrote on my website, quote, "Food undergoes the equivalent of a leverage recapitalization designed to meet the financial goals of its creator. Consumption of junk food, for example, a Twinkie or a sugary drink, is akin to a financial exchange where short-term gains are privatized and long-term costs are socialized in the form of horrific health outcomes. The metabolic donkeys, consumers, pay relatively little money and turn a blind eye to the health consequences of their food choices, instead hoisting the fantastic profits of companies like Monster Inc. and opting for a shortened, diseased life. Today, Monster Inc., the company behind the sugary carbonated beverage, is the best performing stock in history, far outstripping Apple in terms of financial returns in the last 20 years. I was referenced in an article in Forbes magazine for this post, and later this quote was included in a book by Dan Monroe called Casino Healthcare. The book is a critical assessment of the problems in the U.S. healthcare system. The work I did on this topic so long ago is important because it helps me understand the massive social and political forces at work that today have the potential to propel this new class of drugs into the stratosphere. The marketing of hyper-palatable foods targets cultural and emotional dimensions that promote overconsumption. One memorable slogan I came across for Snickers bar said, "You're not you when you're hungry." As with any drug, you can't just focus on the positives. There are always trade-offs. And in the case of this new class of drugs, the significant trade-offs are referred to as side effects. They don't work in all people, and they carry serious complications like nausea, fatigue, and a variety of gastrointestinal disorders. In fact, a significant number of patients stop taking the drugs within a few months due to side effects. There's another nuance to this story of side effects, and this has to do with the potential for the drugs to lose efficacy over time. This could be due to patients developing GLP-1 resistance while under treatment, similar to the way diabetics develop insulin resistance. In clinical trial, non-diabetic patients lost more weight than diabetic patients, which suggests diabetics were already GLP-1 resistant. There's another disturbing side effect, which is the loss of muscle mass or sarcopenia, which can range from 30 to 50% of the weight lost. There is little clinical data to show how a patient can go off these drugs without regaining the weight lost or overcome some of the side effects caused by treatment, such as the onset of resistance or the worsening of resistance, leaving patients in a worse metabolic state after cessation of treatment. In any case, the effects of long-term use for weight loss are not known, and the side effects are significant. This is the circumstance that points to the opportunity I see. To sum it up in broad strokes, on the one hand, there's a giant societal force at work, a destructive, ongoing health disaster that is a massive effort to market hyper-palatable junk foods through emotional and cultural pathways that target dopamine. On the other hand, there's a new drug class that you can think of as a technology intermediating in the human gut-brain axis, an extensive network of nerves, hormones, neurotransmitters, and gut microbes that regulate satiety, blood sugar, mood, and the functioning of other vital organs. Tinkering with this complexity requires a little more development, I think. I'd like to talk about what's at stake here. Failing to address the obesity and diabetes epidemic could literally bankrupt the country. It's just not an option. So it's inevitable that private insurance companies and the government will eventually approve funding for these drugs as a weight loss treatment on a large scale. This is what is driving Novo Nordisk to become the largest drug company in the world and also the largest company in Europe by market cap. The truth is, I don't expect the political leadership to roll out a generational effort to reduce obesity through caloric restriction, starting with the revamp of school lunches, for example. Instead, I'm anticipating a pharmaceutical solution. It's just the way our system works. This brings me back to the biotech industry. Generally speaking, biotechs are the innovation engine for drug discovery and development, while pharmaceutical companies tend to supply and market approved drugs. Today, there are a number of newer GLP-1 drugs under development called dual and triple agonists because they have multiple mechanisms of action compared to the leading drugs today that are monoagonists. What's promising is the clinical potential for these new, more advanced GLP-1s to reduce side effects by lowering the dose of GLP-1 without reducing efficacy or health outcomes. Plus, today these drugs have to be taken as subcutaneous injections, usually weekly shots. In addition to the emerging superiorities of dual and triple GLP-1 agonists compared to GLP-1 single agonists, both in terms of efficacy and tolerability, some new promising clinical stage drugs are developing a GLP-1 in pill form that has the potential to address tapering and improve access. GLP-1 effects, positive and negative, are differentiated in different populations based on factors such as genetics or metabolic state. It's just not known exactly how they work yet. But clinical trials show that these new dual and triple agonists are moving towards personalized medicine with fewer side effects and better outcomes. Even more exciting is that some large pharmaceutical companies missed the GLP-1 bandwagon and now must purchase innovative biotechs to gain a foothold in what looks like the biggest drug class in history moving down the road. And just imagine, with 100 million obese Americans, not to mention the rest of the world, just 100 million in America, barely 1 million have taken GLP-1 for weight loss. So this is where you want to be as an investor, seeking asymmetric risk-reward opportunities in the biotechs and clinical development of these new, more advanced GLP-1s. I'll leave some links below with ideas and additional material.